Welcome back. In this demonstration, we're going to do the oil pastel for our watercolor oil pastel koi pond. Before we get started on the actual demonstration, let's talk about creating our artwork with koi in mind. We're going to talk specifically about shapes and colors. You can see by these two pictures here, I've got a variety of different koi that I found on the internet. You can see they all have different colors and different patterns and different repetition of colors, and two close-up pictures of koi. Now, looking at these koi fish, you can see these different colors on their body. Sometimes they're white, black, orange, this yellowish color. They even can have some like bluish gray stuck in between their scales. And as we look closer, we're going to talk about shapes. First, talking about shapes, there are things called geometric shapes. There are squares, rectangles, triangles, circles, and we wouldn't see those so much on any of these fish. What we're going to see are more shapes that look like this. Amorphous shapes, we call that. An amorphous shape is kind of a non-definable blob-like shape. Sometimes they're called natural shapes or organic shapes, biomorphic, or I like amorphous shapes. Now, as we start to add the amorphous shapes onto the body of our koi, we want to think about the difference between pattern and repetition. We do not want to see any patterns. A pattern is a design that repeats itself in a regular fashion. So these all down here are different kinds of patterns. This one's by color, this one's by color, this one being just by shape, and this one being by shape and color. But on our koi fish, we're going to want to be looking at repetition. Now, repetition is whenever you repeat an element in such a way to make a visual statement. So here, on these two examples of fish, you know, the fish, if we were creating it as an artwork, has different red splotches or amorphous shapes on it, and they're repeated to make repetition, but they are not making a pattern, so to speak. Likewise, this black and white fish back here has repeated colors and repeated like amorphous shapes, but there's no pattern to it. So as we start our own drawing here, we're going to want to keep those principles in mind. Now, we're going to be using oil pastels, and sometimes when the oil pastels come in the container, they get a little grimy on the edge. So you're going to want to make sure that you wipe them off before they use them. You can also have a paper towel at your spot right there to have on your spot so that you can keep your hands off. Now, as we start oil pasteling, you're going to want to make sure that you press hard and use pressure to push on your oil pastel and make it nice and thick. You do not want to have a light pressure here. Once you do that, you're not going to be able to do blending very well. Blending is when we take the two edges and kind of smear them together. You don't want to see any white paper there unless you want it to be light. Okay, so here we go. This is my start. This is what we want it to look like at the end. And if you want something to be white, you need to use the white oil pastel. Now here, I take the oil pastel and I color in an amorphous shape. Now I tip it up so you can see against the camera where that white splotch is. So while I'm painting this in, I can see it in real life, but it's kind of hard to see since the paper is laying flat like that. Now as you start painting in, or not painting, but oil pasteling in your shapes, think about those amorphous shapes. You want them to be natural, not regular. You don't want any hard shapes. You want them to look like they're naturally part of this fish. Now, some points you're pressing so hard, this oil pastel might kind of crumple apart, or you might get, especially on the white oil pastel might get a little crumply. So be careful of that. And here you can see I have my hand on my paper towel so that I don't get the oil pastel all over, from my grimy fingers, all over the rest of my drawing. So as you proceed forward, keep in mind that you're filling your whole fish in. You want all those areas to be nice and solid. If you want something to be white, make sure that it's white. If you want something to be looking finished, make sure that it's pressed hard. Here you can barely see it, but I get this white ring around where this fish is, and here I even go off my page, and I press really hard. You can see it there when I lift it up, so that white will stand out as the ring of where the fish is coming out. Now here, the last section, I just outlined my fish nicely so there's a nice crisp edge to it. And I outline the white areas that are the fins there. And I use my oil pastel to put on a few texture marks for the fins as well. So as you get finished, make sure that yes, you do have your oil pastel outline. Yes, you do have all of your fish areas colored in hard so that the oil pastel is really nice and solid, and that you do have this one ring down here on your paper so that when we do our watercoloring, it resists the watercolor. And this is what your finished oil pastel should look like, so that when you start your watercolor next time, the watercolor will fully resist against the oil pastel. Thank you for joining me for the oil pastel section of our koi watercolor pond.